Good afternoon, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View Radio Show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and all major podcast providers. So if you can't catch the show live, you can download it or simply use our free podcast player, which is available on our website at www.theorganicview.com. If you'd like to connect with us, please post a question on our wall on Facebook or send me a tweet at June Stoyer on Twitter. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. Today's show is sponsored by Austria's finest naturally authentic pumpkin seeds and pumpkin seed oil from the Steiermark, available at organicuniverse.com. Listeners of The Organic View can receive $1 off their purchase by using the coupon code ORGVIEW. That's ORGVIEW. Also, don't forget to check out our contest section on our website to submit your information for our free monthly giveaways. For more information, please visit our website at www.theorganicview.com/contests. As we continue our special series called The Neonicotinoid View, Tom and I are going to talk about a number of subjects, including the situation with the EPA, in which one of their top officials is now going to be working for CropLife America. Many people feel that industry recruits top government workers to navigate through the system. However, it may just be that industry is trying to retain top people to avoid environmental catastrophes. However, is this strategic or pragmatic? That's something that we're going to discuss. Also in the news, Japan has reported honeybee losses from pesticide used on rice paddies. Will Japanese beekeepers suffer the same fate as other beekeepers before action is taken? Also, an open letter to American beekeepers was published a month ago and is still drawing attention. What has been the impact of this letter? So these are pretty much the issues that we're going to be talking about today, as well as a few others if we have the time. But first, I'd like to welcome to the show my special guest co-host, Tom Theobald. Hello, Tom.
Hello, June. Welcome to Colorado. We've gone into a cold spell. We had 96 degrees on the 4th of July, and yesterday it didn't even get to 60. So we're into the depths of fall or something.
And how are the bees?
Well, this means the bees can't fly in as large a numbers as they normally would. They like the heat, and almost all of the hay was cut around here within the last 10 days, so that cut off whatever honey flow was ongoing.
Thank you, Tom. And for our listeners who enjoy your weather report, as always, it's always nice to know how things are in your neck of the woods. New York, it's pretty nice. A little on the humid side, but otherwise sunny, typical summer weather. Now then, getting to our main topic. CropLife has hired Dr. Nader M., I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, El-Kasabani, as the Senior Director of Environmental Policy. And I just want to read this. This is an article that appears on croplifeamerica.org. And it says, in its position as Senior Director, he will be responsible for the development, implementation, and management of science and regulatory policy strategies on environmental issues to help further CropLife America's objectives and strategic plan. He will also work closely with member leaders to manage the Environmental Risk Assessment Committee and its working groups. Now, this gentleman has an amazing background. Let's see, if you take a look at his tenure, he served as the branch chief in the Office of Pesticide Programs, Antimicrobials Division, Risk Assessment and Science Support Branch. And before joining EPA, he was a research assistant in the Department of Entomology at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville for 5 years. He also taught as an adjunct professor of microbiology for Montgomery County Community College in Rockville, Maryland for 10 years. So he's got a pretty impressive background. So, Tom, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, is it a smart move for industry to recruit some of these top officials from EPA? Do you think it's going to make a difference?
Oh, I think it will make a lot of difference, and this has been going on for a long, long time. The cynics among us would say that the the EPA and the USDA and many of these other government agencies that we support are simply a step in the career path for these people into the corporate world. And many of them will return. And I think that if you did a survey of EPA management, you would find that many of them have the pesticide corporations in their background. It's a revolving door, and it's been going on for years, and it's very effective for the chemical industry because they in effect manage the EPA. We don't have an independent EPA.
But if you look at this gentleman's background, he really has quite a lot of experience, and also it's just a little further down in the announcement. He has received 3 U.S. EPA bronze medals for commendable service. I think that's pretty impressive.
Well, I guess on the surface it is. And the fact that he's gone to industry does not necessarily mean that he's going to be working against the interests of the people. But if experience is our guide, they didn't hire this man to promote the interests of the people.
Well, I don't know why they hired him other than the fact that he does have an amazing background, but I will say this much. We can only hope that the choices that they make as far as who they hire will actually benefit the environment and not continue the destructive pattern that has been going on with industry for so many years. So the situation with the global decline of honeybees is a very well-known issue. It's not something that is just known in certain circles.
Well, I think one of the comments that was made by Jay Vroom of Crop Life is pretty telling, and that is that the intent here is to assure pesticide sustainability, not environmental health or anything like that. Pesticide sustainability. These are their words. We haven't put these in their mouth.
That is very true. But regardless of what people may predict might happen as far as this new career move, it's interesting how many people are talking about the impact of neonicotinoids. Recently, I attended a number of conferences. One of them was the New York Summer Fancy Food Show, and it was interesting how many people that were there, whether they were attendees, they were exhibiting because they were manufacturers, what have you, were well aware of the fact that there is something going on with the bees, and it has something to do with pesticides. And in addition to that particular show, I attended the Renewable Energy Finance Forum Wall Street conference, which was the week after. Or maybe it was a week before, but so many people that I spoke to also were well aware of the fact that there is a very big issue going on with the bees, and it's pesticide related. So it's not as though this is something that can be swept under the rug. People understand that there is something going on. I don't think the majority of the public understands exactly what it is, because you still have so many websites and so many different people that are concerned or just exploiting the subject, putting out the wrong information because they haven't read the science. I mean, you and I talk about it all the time because it's something that interests us. It's something that we're very passionate about, but there are a lot of people who are aware that there is something going on. They're just not too sure what.
Well, I think one of the reasons why they may be a little bit confused or misdirected is because industry has made it a conscious effort to confuse the people, to distort the science, to put out articles that are misleading and distorted, and in many cases just flat out lies. And most people don't have a deep enough understanding of what's going on here to recognize that they're being duped or that they're forming some false conclusions because they're getting false information.
I think to a certain degree that is true, but I also think that people are starting to come around. I think more and more people are talking about what's going on. I think is also in garden centers, people are educating other customers. whether it's one customer educating another customer or even an employee. So I think we are making progress. It's not happening as quickly as it ought to be, but I do think that we are making progress.
I wouldn't disagree. I think there is much more public awareness, and many of the people who are aware are very knowledgeable.
Also in the news, Japan has reported honeybee losses from pesticides that are used on rice paddies. Now, this is really interesting. This is reported by the Japanese Times. And if you take a look at what's going on in Japan, we talked about this, Tom, a couple of years ago when they first introduced, I think it was imidacloprid, or was it clothianidin?
I think it was clothianidin.
And we knew that there were going to be problems with the bees. And now, how many years later?
Yeah, there's an interesting backstory to this. The Japanese did a very extensive study and, in fact, put out a very thorough video, and I believe it was in 2011. And they were concerned because they were having bee kills as a result of the use of these systemic pesticides on rice. And in fact, they found that the pesticide loads in these bee kills were 68% rice pollen. The interesting part of this is because the following year, the EPA, the U.S. EPA, approved the use of clothianidin, one of the worst of the neonicotinoids, for foliar application and seed treatment on rice. They either were unaware of the Japanese research or they chose to ignore it. I would suggest probably the latter. But the interesting thing is that you wouldn't think that rice would be a problem, but rice occupies the same niche in the bee world that corn does. Rice is wind-pollinated. Corn is wind-pollinated. It does not need pollinators to be pollinated. But because it's wind-pollinated, it has to produce pollen in large quantities. It's a relatively low-level protein, but it's in abundance, and the bees exploit that. And as the Japanese showed, 68% of the pollen loads represented rice pollen. Well, what did the EPA do with that information? Nothing. It simply ignored it. I'm beginning to wonder, and many others are beginning to wonder, whether this avalanche of scientific research has anything to do with what's going to be done at all, because the regulators simply go on merrily along, carrying out the directions of their corporate handlers, and continue to approve these chemicals and disregard the science. I've said it before, and I know that you've admonished me for saying it too much, but this is a criminal enterprise, and we need to begin addressing it as such. We cannot expect these people to act responsibly because we have every evidence that they will not. They look at the law and they look at the regulations not to understand what their responsibilities are, but to figure out a way to avoid the law, to evade the law, to keep from carrying out their responsibilities.
Well, be that as it may, what are we supposed to do, especially with the elections coming up, and not one candidate is even remotely concerned about any of this? Nothing's going to change.
Well, what's going to change is this environmental disaster is going to unfold rapidly. That's what's going to change. And it may already be too late. They may have poisoned the environment at such a massive level that it would take years to recover, even if we could wave a magic wand and eliminate all of these sources of these problems tonight. We would be suffering these consequences for years. The neonicotinoids alone have half-lives of years.
Well, Tom, you might want to touch upon what the sublethal effects are for people who don't quite understand what you're saying, because a lot of people who tune in that Right, and they say, I don't quite understand why this is a problem. So I think it's helpful if we remind our listeners exactly what these sublethal effects are and why it's not possible to create such a large-scale area that's like a safe haven for pollinators.
Well, if you look at the evidence, there is no safe haven because virtually every square foot of America has been poisoned with these chemicals, and not just these chemicals, but many chemicals. But these chemicals are a primary force in the environmental declines that we're seeing. But we talk about half-lives, and that's the period of time it takes for half of the compound to break down. So for many of the systemic pesticides, the half-life is years. The longest that we have found is 19 years in the prairie soils of Saskatchewan. And if you extrapolate that, if you extend that out, what that means is it would take the environment a little over a century to purge itself of that chemical. And you need to remember, these are water-soluble. They migrate readily with the groundwater. They have been found in every groundwater sample that has been taken in the United States, and the EPA has very carefully avoided doing any of that work. There is no safe dose. The effect that they have on the insects, and bees are the best example that we have because we're looking most closely at them, can be anything from instant death to a lingering death from disruption of the pheromone signals, their homing ability, their navigational ability, memory, grooming, all sorts of things that are required for a complex social unit like a colony of bees to exist successfully. And the interesting thing is that the manufacturers of the systemic pesticides use these very characteristics to market the systemics for termite control. And they talk about the very things that I've talked about. Of course, when we begin to discuss honeybees and other pollinators, they would claim that there's no effect whatsoever, that these are harmless if used as the label directs. Well, there is no safe use of these, and I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again. These are the plutonium of pesticides. And for the EPA to continue to allow the use of these chemicals is, at best, highly irresponsible. And Congress is asleep at the wheel. Two representatives, Conyers and Blumenauer, drafted what's called the Pollinator Protection Act 2 years ago in response to a bee kill in Oregon of 50,000 bumblebees, which probably represented every bumblebee within flight range. Now, that's been languishing in Congress for 2 years now. Nothing has come of it. And I said a couple of weeks ago, they might just as well be working on the Save the Dinosaurs Act. I don't know if their intentions are good or not. The net effect of their efforts are meaningless. The killing continues, the losses continue, and nothing has changed. And in fact, if anything has changed, it's gotten worse.
Well, I think it's interesting that if you take a look at the approach the Japanese government is taking, it doesn't indicate as though this is something that's urgent. And the article that I'm reading appears in japantimes.co.jp. And if you do a search for honeybee deaths surging in Japan due to rice paddy pesticides, which was posted on July 6th of 2015, it says, to prevent further mass deaths, the ministry has asked prefectural governments to set up consultative bodies of rice farmers and beekeepers. Such bodies are expected to allow farmers and beekeepers to share information on pesticide programs and discuss ways to reduce pesticide damage to bees, such as temporary relocation of hive boxes to safer places and the use of granulated insecticides instead of the powdered variety. And then there's a quote, "We aim to reduce honeybee deaths by facilitating information sharing." Quote, a ministry official said. They didn't say who it was, but at least they got something.
So just like in America and many other places, we're just going to talk this problem into oblivion.
Well, actions speak volumes, and having a discussion when you have a major crisis is not really doing something that's immediate. Having a discussions can take place over the course of the next couple of decades. Perhaps they should check out More Than Honey, a film that was aired in 2013, which shows the hand pollination that's going on in China, because the environment is so incredibly toxic. And I think if more government officials saw that film, perhaps they would take immediate action instead of just, putting this on the list of things to do.
Well, once again, let me be harsh. We don't have government officials. We have pesticide industry functionaries. They work under the direction of the pesticide industry and the pesticide industry lobbyists. And the public is putting up with it. And as a consequence, the environment is crashing. The best indicator we have that makes the most sense to most people is the sudden and rapid decline of the monarch butterfly. What's been done to stem that problem? Well, they suggest that we should have a butterfly corridor 200 miles wide, stretching diagonally across the United States, and we should plant flowers. Well, we're planting flowers at the cemetery because what's being carefully avoided is any assessment of what the baseline poisoning of that environment has been. And the evidence that we have is that it's been massive. So to propose to plant flowers that are attractive to pollinators, butterflies included, along that corridor is most likely to produce killing fields, not habitat.
It's kind of like Snow White and the Witch.
At best, this is highly incompetent. At worst, it's corruption.
Well, it's appeasing people that are uninformed, at best.
And nobody is holding the EPA to account. The next level of management is Congress. What has Congress done? As you said earlier, we're entering into an election cycle. We're not hearing anything from these people. The Pollinator Protection Act has gone nowhere, has accomplished nothing other than to provide a little posturing. A year ago, last September, there was a letter sent to Gina McCarthy, director of the EPA, by 60 federal representatives. And one of the things that they demanded was immediate action. Well, nothing has come of that, and to my knowledge, there's been no follow through, and it was just pre-election posturing on the part of 60 representatives.
It's perspective, Tom. Define immediate. What's your definition of immediate? Obviously, not the same as the folks in Congress.
Well, clearly not. And my definition of immediate would probably be more constraining because I'm in the process of losing what was a 40-year business.
My definition of immediate is yesterday. Case in point. Well, that's how it is in New York. But unfortunately, that's not how it works with government elected officials. And once again, where are these congressional leaders that signed their name to that letter? Haven't brought it up.
Their definition of immediate is never.
Well, as long as they are reelected, that seems to be all that matters. And what's interesting is that nothing really has been done still. We had the big memorandum from the White House and then the whole task force, and it seems as though they just come up with these action plans that have no action. So where do we go from here?
Boy, I've wondered many late nights, wondered what we do here because we're courting disaster, and I don't know what the answer is. We have a system that appears to be almost completely dysfunctional with regard to this, unless you happen to be in the pesticide industry, and if you're in the pesticide industry, it's functioning quite fine. But if your criteria for effective functioning is protection of the environment, protection of the health of the people, which is what the EPA charter calls for, we're viewing not simply an environmental disaster, but an environment and an administrative and governmental disaster as well.
Well, the positive side to all of that is that the open letter to American beekeepers is still causing quite a stir, and the comments keep coming in. This open letter to American beekeepers, and folks, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you go to theorganicview.com and you can search in the archives. It was published about a month ago on June 4th, I do believe. And Tom, could you just briefly explain what the letter is about?
Well, the letter came to be because we were concerned that the EPA primarily keeps coming out with these proposals that are delusional at best. For example, label changes that would require that these systemic pesticides be sprayed after dark or early in the morning, and that's tantamount to saying that we're going to do nuclear testing only in the night after everybody's gone to bed. These have, as I said earlier, these products have residuals of years. And for the EPA to propose this as a way of addressing this question is an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to everybody. It's an embarrassment to the people who say it. It's an embarrassment to the management that encourages it to be said. We have a corrupt institution that appears to be doing nothing. And to get to my point, the concern is that the American beekeeping leadership has not said much of anything in response to these, and as a result, these ineffective, delusional efforts become embedded in the system, and they go unchallenged. And if they go unchallenged, the implication is that the beekeeping leadership must agree with it. And they need to speak out. They may be protecting their own interests, and I know many of these fellows, and they're friends of mine, I hope at least, still friends of mine, and they're trying to protect their own operations. They don't want to be disruptive. They don't want to create ill will with the landowners that they work with, but by remaining silent, they may be temporarily protecting their own operations, but they're putting all of the rest of the beekeeping industry and the beekeeping community and the pollinator community at risk. By doing nothing, they're putting everything at risk.
Well, having said that, some of the comments indicate that the government is doing as much as they can, and one person wrote that he found the letter to be offensive and highly unsubstantiated. It stinks of politics, and I hope beekeepers actually read the report and see what our government is trying to do to help the pollinators in our country. And he wrote, as a beekeeper, I find this type of abusive language unacceptable, and I reject any association with the blatant attempt at fear tactics that are written here. And it's interesting because he refers to this whole thing with the White House that we just talked about, which was basically something to appease the public, but has had no action. And people just went off. And one guy wrote, honeybees are being poisoned by these systemic pesticides, and your government wants you to plant more flowers? If you're a real beekeeper, you should find that offensive. And let me tell you, people are just going off. So it's interesting how people are having these discussions. They're writing back and forth. They're responding to each other. And at least they're doing what the government officials should be doing, which is if they want to have a discussion with the people who are impacted. Have a discussion with the beekeepers who are trying to keep these bees alive. Have a discussion with the people who are dependent upon a healthy environment. So, once again, Tom, to be continued, this is not something that I think this open letter has really done a great job of getting a conversation started. So, thank you and Graham and Dr. Tenekes for putting this together.
Well, we have to keep speaking out, and it's obviously it's frustrating when someone who's really ignorant of what the substance of the argument is would criticize something that's a well-intended effort to bring some change.
It certainly has. Tom, thanks again for participating in today's show. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We are out of time. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, June.
Thanks, Tom.